So Lucid's hyping up a pretty big announcement for this Friday, and of course I'll dive into this and admit I was wrong if my predictions are false here, but it's pretty obvious that they're planning on releasing a triple motor powertrain. They've posted videos of multiple motor parts circling around each other, and they liked comments from people on Instagram that were talking about there being a triple motor powertrain, and they've alluded to making a triple motor powertrain in the future, so I think most people are pretty convinced there's gonna be a new, faster, with higher horsepower Lucid that's very high performing, incredibly fast. In fact, because of how efficient Lucid motors are and how powerful they can be despite their size, I would not be surprised if this triple motor Lucid is actually able to outperform the Plaid Model S in some regards. 0 to 60 times really start depending more on the traction your tires have after you get below 2 seconds, but it's honestly exciting on one end to be like, okay, there's gonna be like a tier of the Lucid Air that's higher than the Dream Edition, I guess, coming soon, but it's also just not what I think the company really needs right now, and I've kind of had this bad feeling in the back of my head after listening to the past few earnings calls and seeing their burn rate and hearing them talk about logistics issues and them denying to say how many vehicles they're building on a weekly basis. And the more I see Lucid post about these higher end trims, the more it's kind of confirmed my theory that I want to speculate on in today's video, so I apologize if you hate speculation. This isn't the channel for you if you don't like that, because that's what I enjoy doing the most. So I don't think Lucid necessarily has a demand problem, because they have reported they've had around 37,000 reservations, and they clearly have not delivered that many vehicles yet. I personally think they're going to miss their production estimates of 6,000 vehicles by the end of this year, but my guess is that they have a pricing structure problem, where the vast majority of the reservations are for lower end trims like the Air Pure or like the Air Touring, and they have actually a lack of orders when it comes to their higher trims like the Grand Touring and the Grand Touring Performance variant, which was originally not in their product roadmap, but essentially they built all the Dream Editions and delivered as many as they could, and then after that they introduced a more expensive version of the Grand Touring, which is $10,000 more than the Dream Edition for slightly less horsepower. And there were also indications of them emailing reservation holders that had just reserved the Air Pure or the Air Touring, telling them, hey, you should upgrade to the Grand Touring because we're going to give you older pricing. You know, they applied price hikes to all their vehicles, but they were honoring that old, more affordable pricing on those six-figure sedans to people with reservations. So my theory is that Lucid is actually trying to build a certain number of six-figure vehicles and trying to get enough people to upgrade to the Grand Touring and trying to basically justify people dropping $130,000 or $150,000 on their car, but they're not getting enough orders for those higher priced trims, so they're doing their best to try to come up with ways for people to justify spending more on their Lucid, because ultimately they're limited by their factory and their logistics, and they're struggling to output enough vehicles. So their thought process is, if we have higher margins or if we have more people spending more money on the limited cars we can build, that way we won't go bankrupt as quickly, that way we can be more profitable, and they're just struggling to get people to do that. And that's what these teasers are kind of reaffirming to me. You know, we're already seeing Lucid have a hard time ramping up production and cutting their production estimates twice in a row by pretty substantial margins, and now at the same time, while we're hoping they can ramp up production and we're hoping they can deliver the vehicles they promised and start working on those more affordable trims that so many people have reserved, but instead they're working on announcing a triple motor powertrain, and I wouldn't be surprised if the timeline on this triple motor Lucid is actually pretty competitive and you can get it by the end of this year. That will kind of prove my point that Lucid isn't quite sure if they can even start delivering vehicles at lower pricing, and is just going to continue to try to upsell existing reservation holders, and maybe because they're not getting enough people to upgrade to the Grand Touring Performance, they had to come up with something else that was better than the Dream Edition so that they get another big wave of orders, and people probably willing to spend $190,000 or $200,000 on this vehicle, because Lucid is fundamentally limited by how many vehicles they can build because of how they've laid out their supply chains or how they've laid out their factory. It's no longer a supply chain problem. They confirmed that at the last earnings call when Peter Rawlinson basically said that, yeah, in the past we were having shortages on suppliers, but now that we've got the supplies, we're discovering that actually manufacturing these cars and ramping up is more difficult than we originally thought, which was pretty ironic considering Peter was known for docking Tesla for having production hell, and he was saying that, you know, real car companies don't have issues with ramping production, and all that says is that you didn't plan out things properly. But now they're trying to ramp and clearly lacking in their production targets by a long shot, so the best they can do is try to convince more people to spend more money on their car. And because the Lucid is a very fast vehicle, and don't get me wrong, it's great around the track, but they're probably sick of people just opting for the Plaid Model S instead, because you can typically get that for cheaper and have faster 0 to 60 times and have a hatchback with more practicality. It may not be the status symbol that a Lucid Air is, but still, you got to admit, based on the sales of the refresh Model S, it's selling incredibly well. And what you'll notice is that with Tesla's lineup, sorry, I have to compare them, but Tesla is kind of the gold standard with EVs right now, securing a very large majority of all EV sales. They don't have a giant gap between the dual motor and the tri-motor. They keep their lineups fairly simple, which means that, okay, you spend $105,000 for the long range and a little over $130,000 for the Plaid. But Lucid is trying to have like 5 different variants of this one sedan, and all of them go over 400, some of them 500 miles on a charge, and I think more people are starting to realize, seeing people road trip with long-range Model 3s and Model Ys, once you have a solid charging infrastructure, that 400 versus 500 mile range doesn't make that big an impact. And really the only major differences between Lucid's lineup, despite there being like $50,000 between the Air Pure and the Air Grand Touring, is luxury features. What the materials on the inside of the vehicle are made out of, or the horsepower, which, yeah, some people who take the vehicles on the track, they care about that type of thing, but it's definitely not the majority. And I think there's just a huge number of people that are impressed by the efficiency, the design, and the range. It is a very good looking car, and I think a lot of people want to get behind the wheel of them, but they're just looking at the pricing and they're like, yeah, this one saves me $40,000-$50,000 and I can still get over 400 miles of range. Yeah, that's plenty. I'll take the Air Pure. So Lucid's never going to disclose this. We'll never know it for sure, but I'm convinced that likely over 50% of those 37,000 reservations are for the Air Pure, and Lucid knows that they're going to really struggle with profitability once they start building that vehicle. So what they're doing right now with their limited availability is just trying to justify people spend as much as possible on these cars. And because they have such great powertrains that are very small and compact, they realize, like, well, we could probably get a big influx in orders if we made a vehicle that was faster than the Plaid Model S, and the only way to do that is for us to make a triple motor powertrain, and then we can sell it for $190,000 or $200,000. For the car enthusiasts out there, that's still going to be impressive, and I think a lot of people will enjoy that vehicle. I'm not saying the product itself is bad, but I think it's an indication of how difficult the ramp up has been for them, and I foresee them continuing to delay those lower end models and continuing to try to upsell people on, you know, you could wait for the Air Pure, but if you're willing to just shell out a little bit extra money now, you can get a way better car that's way faster with a way better interior, way better features. And I think those lower end vehicles, they're just going to continue to push out, and they're going to continue to try to come up with new ways to justify charging 6 figures for your car. So even when we get closer to the launch of the Air Touring and the Air Pure, they're going to be like, actually, here's the Air Touring Performance, which is $20,000 more, but you get so much more horsepower. It's totally worth it. You should really shell out for that. And if you don't want to spend the extra money, you're just going to have to continue to wait a little bit longer because the ramp up is taking longer than we thought. I guess that's my pessimistic view of the company. I hope I'm wrong on this because I don't want the company to go bankrupt. I want them to continue to exist, but ever since I got that idea in my head, I continue to see Lucid trying to upsell people and trying to come up with new designs and new features and new powertrains, like the stealth mode they were hyping up. Like, people are still waiting on their cars and they're like, hey, you should spend extra money on this new color option we just came out with. Again, that supports the argument that they're limited on how many vehicles they can build, but trying to get more money out of the few customers they do have. So do you think I'm crazy, or do you think I'm being too negative on Lucid? What's your guys' defense? Why do you think they're comfortable introducing new powertrains and new models when they're struggling so much with the production ramp and cutting their estimates so many times? Why do they want to hype up a triple motor powertrain right now? All of your theories, let me know what you're thinking down below, and thank you to everyone on Patreon supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.